This is a fake ID!
It's real. Check it.
I don't need to. You're coming with me. You have no grounds to detain me. This is your last warning!
Sir, I need you to step back. What's the problem, officer? License and registration, now. This is harassment. I know my rights. Hand it over, or you're coming with me. Fine, take it. License and registration, now.
Officer, this is unnecessary. Here's my ID.
This says government. What's your business here?
That's classified. I suggest you stand down.
Classified? You're not going anywhere.
They thought he was just another target. They thought his badge meant nothing against their guns. On a lonely stretch of highway snaking through the rural outskirts of Oak Haven, a corrupt patrolman pulled over a man he assumed was an easy mark. He did not know that the driver in his crosshairs carried a credential capable of dismantling his entire corrupt reality. Within agonizing minutes, unchecked authority would rot into absolute paralyzing terror. Karma was not approaching. It was already waiting patiently in the driver's seat. Highway 41 belonged almost exclusively to Officer Vance Harlan. It was his hunting ground. For years, the 42-year-old patrolman had operated under a self-imposed mandate: assert dominance, establish fear, and never back down. The Oak Haven Police Department was small, insular, and fiercely protective of its own. In this town, the badge was not a symbol of the law. It was a shield against consequences. Officer Vance Harlan sat in his idling cruiser, the engine purring a low, steady hum. Next to him sat Officer Sawyer Quinn, a young rookie fresh out of the academy, quiet, eager to learn, and still naive enough to believe that the uniform was universally a force for good. Vance viewed him as a blank canvas, someone to mold into the correct way of policing, which in Vance's playbook meant taking control by any means necessary. A pair of headlights cut through the gloom, approaching at exactly the posted speed limit. As the sleek charcoal gray Audi A8 passed the hidden cruiser, the glow of a street lamp illuminated the driver's profile for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Vance caught the silhouette of a black man, dressed sharply, driving alone in a county where he statistically stood out. "Watch this," Vance muttered, his voice a low gravel. He did not wait for Sawyer's response before shifting the cruiser into drive and pulling out onto the highway. "He was not speeding, sir," Sawyer noted, his voice laced with mild confusion, eyes darting to the radar display. "He crossed the yellow line," Vance lied smoothly, the justification rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Failure to maintain the lane, plus out-of-state plates. Let's see what he's running from." Inside the Audi, Director Marcus Whitaker exhaled a long, tired sigh as the blinding reflection of red and blue lights suddenly strobed in his rearview mirror. At 58, Marcus had spent his entire adult life navigating the intricate, often treacherous waters of the American justice system. He was a man of immense patience, but tonight his reserves were running dangerously low. He had just wrapped up a grueling day of depositions in a neighboring state and was simply trying to reach his hotel for the night. He signaled, slowed down smoothly, and pulled the Audi onto the gravel shoulder, ensuring he left plenty of room for the officer to stand safely away from traffic. It was a practiced maneuver born not just from respect for the law, but from the grim inherited survival instinct of knowing how these encounters could go wrong. Marcus placed the car in park, turned off the engine, and immediately rolled down all 4 windows. He turned on the interior dome light, illuminating the cabin, and placed his hands firmly at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He knew the routine flawlessly: make no sudden movements, keep hands visible, be polite, de-escalate. In the rearview mirror, he watched the patrol car doors open. A burly, broad-shouldered officer with a shaved head and an aggressive forward-leaning gait approached the driver's side. A younger, thinner officer flanked the passenger side, hanging back slightly. Vance approached the Audi with his hand resting casually but purposefully on the butt of his service weapon. It was an intimidation tactic he favored. He unclipped his heavy tactical flashlight and shone the blinding beam directly into Marcus's face, disregarding the already bright interior lighting. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Vance demanded. No good evening, no explanation for the stop, just a blunt, authoritative bark meant to establish the hierarchy of the interaction immediately. Marcus squinted against the harsh glare, his hands remaining perfectly still on the steering wheel. "Good evening, officer. My wallet is in my inner left jacket pocket. My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" The measured, articulate tone, devoid of the panic or subservience Vance usually encountered, instantly irritated the officer. It felt like defiance disguised as compliance. "I said, give me your license and registration," Vance snapped, tapping the heavy metal barrel of his flashlight against the window frame of the expensive car. "I don't need a speech. Just hand them over." "I am simply informing you of where my items are before I reach for them, officer, for both of our safety," Marcus replied, his voice remaining terrifyingly calm, a stark contrast to Vance's rising aggression. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus moved his right hand toward the glove compartment. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Vance shouted suddenly, stepping back half a pace and gripping his sidearm tighter. On the other side of the car, Sawyer jumped, his hand instinctively flying to his own belt, though he looked confused as to what had prompted the sudden escalation. Marcus froze, his hand hovering halfway between the wheel and the dashboard. He took a slow, deep breath, regulating his heart rate. He had spent decades dissecting encounters exactly like this one. He recognized the pattern, the manufactured fear, the deliberate escalation designed to force a mistake. "My hands are visible, officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a weight that demanded to be heard. "I was reaching for the registration as you requested. I will not move again until you explicitly tell me how you want me to retrieve my documents." Vance felt a flush of heat creeping up his neck. This driver was too calm, too composed. He was not playing the game right. The lack of fear felt like a direct insult to Vance's authority. He leaned closer to the window, inhaling deeply, searching for the phantom scent of alcohol or marijuana, the universal wildcards that could justify tearing a car apart. "I smell alcohol," Vance declared, though the only scent wafting from the pristine cabin was expensive leather and a faint trace of peppermint. "Have you been drinking tonight?" "I do not consume alcohol, officer," Marcus replied flatly, "and I would appreciate it if you directed that flashlight away from my eyes so we can communicate properly." "You don't get to tell me what to do, buddy," Vance sneered, leaning his face into the window frame, the flashlight beam remaining fixed on Marcus's pupils. "This is my stop. You're in my town. Now, unbuckle your seatbelt and step out of the vehicle." "On what grounds?" Marcus asked. "You haven't articulated a reason for the stop, nor have you established probable cause to order me out of my vehicle." "Pennsylvania versus Mims," Vance shot back, a smug smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. He loved throwing out case law to civilians, confident they would not understand the nuances. "Supreme Court says I can order you out for officer safety. Now step out, or I will drag you out for resisting." Marcus stared at the man through the blinding light. A cold, calculating silence stretched between them. Marcus was not afraid. He was profoundly disappointed. The rot in this department was exactly as deep as the preliminary reports had suggested. "Very well," Marcus said softly. He slowly unclicked his seatbelt, ensuring the movement was telegraphed perfectly. "I'm stepping out of the vehicle." The gravel crunched under Marcus's polished Oxford shoes as he stepped out into the humid night air. He was a tall man standing an easy 6'2" and carried himself with an innate rigid posture that immediately made Vance feel the need to puff out his chest. "Turn around, face the car. Put your hands on the roof," Vance commanded, his voice tight. Marcus complied silently. He placed his hands flat against the cool metal of the Audi's roof. He could feel Vance stepping close behind him, invading his personal space, the heavy breathing of the agitated officer brushing against the back of his neck. Vance aggressively kicked Marcus's feet farther apart, wider than necessary, a deliberate physical provocation. He then began an unnecessarily rough pat-down, his heavy hands trailing forcefully up Marcus's legs and around his waist. "What are you doing in Oak Haven?" Vance demanded as he patted him down. "Don't see a lot of guys like you driving cars like this around here." "I am traveling for work," Marcus replied, his voice muffled slightly as he faced the car roof. "Work? Right?" Vance scoffed, feeling the outline of Marcus's wallet in his inner breast pocket. "What kind of work? You a rapper? Play basketball?" The sheer, unapologetic ignorance of the question made Officer Sawyer Quinn, still standing on the passenger side, wince visibly. Sawyer shifted his weight, suddenly feeling very uncomfortable with the direction his training officer was taking this stop. "I work for the government," Marcus stated simply. Yeah, which branch? The DMV? Vance laughed at his own joke, stepping back. All right, get your wallet out. Nice and slow. Hand over the ID. Marcus turned around slowly. He lowered his hands, reached smoothly into his left inner jacket pocket, and withdrew a dark leather bifold wallet. He did not just extract his driver's license. Instead, with a practiced flick of his wrist, he opened the wallet fully and extended it toward Vance's chest. Vance kept his flashlight aimed at Marcus's face, but cast his eyes downward to look at the leather wallet. He expected a standard state license. He expected to run the name, maybe find an unpaid parking ticket, something to exert his power over. Instead, the beam of his flashlight caught the reflection of solid, polished gold. It was not a local police shield. It was a heavy, intricately detailed federal badge dominated by a majestic eagle and a central seal. Beneath the badge, housed behind a clear plastic window, was a crisp, government-issued identification card bearing Marcus's face. Vance's brain stumbled. He lowered the flashlight slightly, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process the text engraved into the gleaming gold and printed on the ID card. The bold black letters seemed to burn themselves into his retinas. Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, Marcus Whitaker, Deputy Director, Special Investigations Division. The silence that fell over the side of Highway 41 was absolute. The chirping of the crickets seemed to abruptly cease. The low hum of the police cruiser's engine sounded deafening in the sudden vacuum of sound. Vance's arrogant smirk did not just fade. It evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated shock. His breath hitched in his throat. His eyes darted from the heavy gold badge to the uncompromising stone-cold face of the man holding it and back to the badge again. The Office of the Inspector General, the DOJ. The people who investigated corrupt police departments, who handed down federal indictments, who possessed the power to strip a badge, dissolve a pension, and put a dirty cop in a federal penitentiary for the rest of his natural life. As I was trying to explain, Officer Harlan, Marcus said, breaking the silence, his voice was no longer that of a compliant citizen. It had shifted, taking on the authoritative, commanding timbre of a high-ranking federal official holding court. He had read the name tag on Vance's uniform, committing it to a memory that missed nothing. I am Marcus Whitaker, and you have just committed a profound error in judgment. Vance took a physical step backward, his boot crunching loudly on the gravel. Panic, sharp and metallic, tasted like pennies in his mouth. His mind raced frantically, trying to find a way out, a loophole, a way to rewind time. Is this some kind of joke? Vance stammered, his voice losing all its prior gravelly aggression. It pitched upward, thin and reedy. You can get fake badges online. This is impersonating a federal officer. That's a felony. It was a desperate, pathetic bluff, and both men knew it. Marcus snapped the wallet shut and returned it to his pocket in one fluid motion. He stood at his full height, looking down his nose at the officer. We both know it is real, Harlan, Marcus said, dropping the title, Officer, deliberately. Just as we both know that you did not see me cross the yellow line, we both know you do not smell alcohol. And we both know exactly why you pulled me over. Sir, Sawyer the rookie finally spoke up, taking a tentative step forward. Marcus shifted his gaze to the younger officer. The anger in his eyes softened infinitesimally, replaced by a calculating assessment. Officer Quinn, is it? Marcus asked, noting the silver name tag. I sincerely hope for your sake that your training officer's habits have not rubbed off on you yet. I don't, Sawyer stammered, looking helplessly at Vance, who was currently staring at the asphalt as if praying for a sinkhole to swallow him whole. Officer Harlan, Marcus snapped, bringing Vance's terrified gaze back to him. You are currently wearing a body camera. I note that the blinking red light indicates it is active. I'm also aware that your cruiser's dash cam is recording this entire interaction. Would you like to repeat your legal justification for ordering me out of my vehicle for the audio record? For officer safety, sir. Vance managed to choke out the words, tasting like ash. The sir slipped out instinctively, a subconscious recognition of the massive shift in the power dynamic. Officer safety, Marcus repeated, the words dripping with contempt. You initiated a pretextual stop based on racial profiling, manufactured a false traffic violation, attempted to fabricate probable cause by claiming the scent of alcohol, and then used aggressive physical intimidation on a compliant driver. Do I have the sequence of events correct? No, sir, that's not... You were swerving, Vance lied again, but the conviction was completely gone. He sounded like a child caught stealing candy, desperate and unconvincing. Marcus reached into his right pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He tapped the screen a few times. You see, Harlan, the interesting thing about my line of work is that I rarely travel anywhere without a reason. The Department of Justice does not send its Deputy Director of Special Investigations to rural towns in the dead of night for sightseeing. Vance felt the blood drain entirely from his face. His knees suddenly felt weak, trembling almost imperceptibly against the fabric of his uniform trousers. What? What are you doing here? Vance asked, the question escaping as a hoarse whisper. I am here for you, Marcus said, the words falling like a judge's gavel. The gravity of Marcus Whitaker's statement hung in the humid air, suffocating Vance. I am here for you. The words echoed in the patrolman's mind, drowning out the static crackle of his own police radio. That's impossible, Vance whispered, shaking his head in denial, though his wide, terrified eyes betrayed the truth he was already accepting. You don't even know me. I know everything about you, Vance Harlan, Marcus replied calmly, unlocking his phone and bringing up a heavily encrypted file. He did not look at the screen. He kept his piercing gaze locked on the crumbling cop in front of him. I know that a man named Samuel Higgins filed a formal complaint alleging you dragged him from his vehicle and broke his collarbone during a routine traffic stop. I know that complaint was buried by your shift sergeant. I know about the missing evidence locker cache. I know about the disproportionate number of minority drivers you pull over on this exact stretch of Highway 41. Every specific detail Marcus listed felt like a physical blow to Vance's chest. The arrogant predator from minutes ago was completely gone, replaced by a cornered, panicked animal realizing the trap had already snapped shut. You're bluffing, Vance tried to say, but his voice cracked, betraying a massive spike of adrenaline fueled entirely by fear. Chief Voss cleared me of all that. Internal Affairs closed it. Local Internal Affairs is a myth in Oak Haven, and Chief Harlan Voss is currently the subject of an entirely separate concurrent federal probe, Marcus countered, slicing through Vance's final psychological defense mechanism. The Department of Justice, however, does not close cases because a local police chief writes a friendly memo. We have been building a civil rights division pattern or practice investigation into this department. Tonight was supposed to be a quiet arrival before I serve the subpoenas tomorrow morning. But you, Marcus paused, a grim, humorless smile touching his lips. You just could not help yourself, could you? Officer Sawyer Quinn was now visibly pale. He stood frozen by the front quarter panel of the Audi, his hands raised slightly away from his belt, making absolutely sure he was presenting zero threat to the federal agent. Sir, Sawyer said, his voice trembling slightly, I just want to state for the record, I was just observing. I'm still on probation. Marcus looked at the young man, his expression softening just a fraction. I have the dashcam footage to prove it. Officer Quinn, you stayed back. You did not escalate. Assuming you testify truthfully during the upcoming federal grand jury hearings, your career might survive tonight. I suggest you go stand by your cruiser and touch absolutely nothing. Yes, sir, Sawyer said, practically running backward toward the patrol car, desperate to put as much distance between himself and Vance as physically possible. Left alone with Marcus, the full weight of the catastrophe crashed down on Vance. His pension, his house, his freedom. All of it was suddenly balancing on a knife's edge, held by the man he had just tried to terrorize for sport. Desperation, ugly and raw, clawed its way to the surface. Look, Mr. Whitaker, Agent Whitaker, Vance pleaded, his hands instinctively coming up in a placating gesture, palms outward. The flashlight, previously used as a weapon of intimidation, dangled uselessly from its lanyard around his wrist. Let's just take a breath here. We can figure this out. I made a mistake. It's late. It's dark. I misjudged the situation. You did not misjudge the situation, Marcus corrected him coldly. You executed a perfectly rehearsed routine of intimidation and constitutional violation. The only thing you misjudged was the victim. Please. Vance actually took a step forward. His voice dropped to a pathetic conspiratorial whisper. You don't have to report this. I'll let you go. I'll wipe the dash cam. I'll delete the body cam footage right now. We walk away. No harm, no foul. You never saw me. I never saw you. Marcus stared at Vance, profound disgust etching deep lines into his face. It was the predictable, cowardly pivot. The moment the bully realized he was outmatched, he immediately resorted to bargaining, willing to compound his crimes by offering to destroy evidence. "You are currently wearing a live Axon body camera," Marcus said slowly, deliberately speaking loudly enough for the microphone to pick up every syllable clearly. "The footage is automatically uploaded to a secure cloud server the moment you return to the precinct. You cannot delete it from the device itself without leaving a digital footprint that screams evidence tampering. And even if you could, offering to destroy evidence in front of a federal investigator is a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1519. You just added an obstruction of justice charge to your impending indictment." Vance froze, his eyes darting to the small black box affixed to the center of his chest. The little red light blinked rhythmically, a silent, damning witness to his total collapse. He had forgotten how the new system worked. He had incriminated himself on his own camera. "Turn around, Officer Harlan," Marcus ordered, his voice echoing with finality. "What?" Vance gasped, confused. "I am officially detaining you under suspicion of violating my civil rights under color of law, as well as attempted evidence tampering," Marcus stated, his posture rigid. "You are a flight risk and a danger to the integrity of an ongoing federal investigation. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You can't arrest me," Vance shrieked, the panic finally breaking through his paralysis. "I'm a police officer. I have jurisdiction here. You can't just slap cuffs on me on the side of the highway." "I am a sworn federal agent with arrest authority," Marcus replied unyieldingly, "and unless you wish to add resisting a federal officer to your rapidly expanding list of federal felonies, you will comply immediately." Marcus took a step forward. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. The sheer, overwhelming weight of his authority, backed by the entire apparatus of the United States Department of Justice, was more effective than any firearm. Vance looked wildly around. He looked at the dark, empty highway. He looked back at his cruiser, where Sawyer was standing rigid, staring wide-eyed, offering absolutely no support. He was completely alone. The protective bubble of his badge, his uniform, and his corrupt town had violently popped, leaving him exposed to a reality he had spent years avoiding. Slowly, agonizingly, defeatedly, Vance Harlan turned around. He placed his hands behind his back, his heavy shoulders slumping forward in absolute surrender. Marcus stepped up behind him. "Officer Quinn!" Marcus called out over his shoulder. "Yes, sir," Sawyer yelled back from the cruiser. "Bring me a pair of your handcuffs now." Sawyer did not hesitate. He unclipped his spare set of cuffs from his belt and jogged over, handing them to Marcus with a trembling hand before immediately stepping back. The metallic click-click-click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around Vance's wrists sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet night. The cold steel bit into Vance's skin, a physical manifestation of his sudden, shocking loss of power. For the first time in his life, Vance Harlan felt exactly what it was like to be on the receiving end of absolute helplessness. Marcus checked the tension on the cuffs, ensuring they were secure but not cutting off circulation, a professional courtesy Vance rarely afforded his own prisoners. "Vance Harlan," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative register as he leaned slightly toward the disgraced officer's ear. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As Marcus recited the Miranda warning, the very words Vance had spat out with careless arrogance countless times before, the realization finally settled over the patrolman. His career was dead. His freedom was an illusion. The predator had caught the absolute worst possible prey, and the jaw of the trap was made of solid, inescapable federal iron. Marcus finished the warning, grasped Vance by the upper arm, and began marching him toward the back of the patrol cruiser. "Now," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket for his phone once more, "let's wake up Chief Voss and let him know his department is officially under federal control." The drive back to the Oak Haven Police Department was a masterclass in suffocating silence. Officer Sawyer Quinn gripped the steering wheel of the cruiser with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes glued to the road, terrified to even glance in the rearview mirror. In the caged back seat, Vance Harlan sat awkwardly with his hands cuffed behind him, his chin resting near his chest. The bravado that usually radiated from him was entirely extinguished, replaced by a cold, trembling sweat. Directly behind them, The headlights of Marcus Whitaker's Audi A8 followed like a relentless mechanical predator, tracking its wounded prey. The Oak Haven precinct was a squat, brutalist brick building. At this hour, it was mostly a ghost town. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a dying, erratic hum, and the smell of burnt coffee and industrial floor cleaner hung thick in the stagnant air. Behind the front desk sat Sergeant Grant Foley, a veteran coasting comfortably toward a heavily padded retirement. He was halfway through a crossword puzzle and a stale jelly donut when the heavy glass double doors hissed open. Grant looked up, expecting to see Vance hauling in a drunk driver or a teenage vandal to toss in the drunk tank. Instead, young Sawyer Quinn walked in, looking as though he had just watched a ghost execute his dog. "Quinn?" Grant grunted, brushing powdered sugar off his uniform shirt. "Where's Harlan? You guys bagged someone on the highway again?" Sawyer did not answer. He simply stepped aside. Marcus Whitaker strode into the lobby. He did not walk like a civilian intimidated by the imposing front desk, nor did he walk like a suspect. He walked like he owned the building. He bypassed the civilian waiting area entirely, stepping through the low swinging gate that separated the lobby from the operational bullpen. "Hey, hold on a second, pal," Grant barked, dropping his pen and standing up, his hand reflexively dropping to his duty belt. "You can't come back here. The waiting area is—" Marcus did not slow his pace. Without breaking stride, he reached into his jacket, produced his bifold wallet, and flipped it open, pressing the heavy gold badge and federal ID directly against the plexiglass partition separating the desk from the inner hallway. "Marcus Whitaker, Deputy Director, Office of the Inspector General, Department of Justice," Marcus stated, his voice easily carrying through the quiet station. "I am placing this precinct under temporary federal lockdown. No one enters. No one leaves without my express authorization." Grant's jaw went slack. His eyes darted from the badge to Marcus's uncompromising face. The lethargy of the night shift vanished instantly, replaced by a spike of adrenaline. "Federal what?" "Sir, you need to speak to the chief. I don't have the authority to—" "I'm aware of your lack of authority, Sergeant Foley," Marcus interrupted, his tone chillingly polite, "which is why Officer Quinn is currently escorting Officer Harlan into holding cell number 2. Furthermore, I expect Chief Harlan Voss to walk through those doors as I phoned him from the highway." Right on cue, the heavy steel door leading to the garage bay clanged open. Sawyer emerged, physically guiding a handcuffed, deeply humiliated Vance Harlan by the bicep. Grant gasped, practically choking on his own breath. Seeing Vance, the precinct's most aggressive, untouchable patrolman, shackled and subservient, was a visual his brain struggled to process. "Vance, what the hell is going on, Quinn? Why is he in cuffs?" "He is in custody for severe civil rights violations, false arrest, and attempted destruction of evidence," Marcus answered for the rookie. "Put him in the cell, Officer Quinn, and remove his duty belt and radio." "Yes, sir," Sawyer squeaked, eager to comply and distance himself from the sinking ship. Before Grant could formulate another question, the front doors flew open with violent force. Chief Harlan Voss stormed into the lobby. He was a heavily built man in his late 50s, wearing a rumpled suit jacket over a polo shirt, having clearly thrown his clothes on in a panicked rush. His face was flushed crimson with anger and exertion. "What in God's name is going on in my department?" Voss bellowed, his voice booming off the linoleum floors. He spotted Marcus standing in the center of the bullpen, unbothered by the outburst. "Who the hell are you, and why did you call my personal cell phone threatening to dismantle my precinct?" "Chief Voss," Marcus said, turning slowly to face the enraged man, "I am Deputy Director Whitaker, DOJ. We are currently executing a federal takeover of this facility, pending a sweeping civil rights and corruption investigation. I suggest you lower your voice. You are on federal time now." Voss scoffed, a loud, ugly sound of manufactured defiance. He marched through the swinging gate, invading Marcus's personal space. "Federal time? You think you can just waltz into my town, slap cuffs on my best officer, and claim a takeover because of some phantom investigation? This is my jurisdiction. You have zero authority here until I see a warrant signed by a federal judge." Marcus did not blink. He did not flinch. He simply reached into the inner breast pocket of his tailored jacket and produced a thick, neatly folded sheaf of papers. He calmly unfolded them and flattened them against Sergeant Foley's front desk. "Warrants, actually," Marcus corrected, tapping the top page with his index finger. "Signed yesterday by U.S. District Judge Robert Harrison. They authorized the immediate seizure of all hard drives, physical evidence lockers, internal affairs records, and personnel files within this building. Vance stared at the paperwork, the color draining from his face just as rapidly as it had flushed. The thick black ink of a federal judge's signature was unmistakable. "And as for your best officer," Marcus continued, gesturing toward the holding cells where Vance was now locked behind steel bars, "he made the incredibly poor decision to racially profile, illegally detain, and attempt to intimidate the lead investigator of this operation. His dashboard and body cameras captured the entire sequence of events. He also confessed to covering up previous assaults." He did what?" Vance whispered, turning his horrified gaze toward the holding cell hallway. The good old boy network he had relied on for years was crumbling before his eyes. "He pulled the wrong thread, Chief," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "And now the entire sweater is unraveling. I strongly advise you to direct Sergeant Foley to hand over the keys to the evidence room because my team is pulling into your parking lot right now." The heavy rumble of high-output engines vibrated through the foundation of the precinct through the reinforced glass of the lobby doors. Vance and Foley watched in stunned silence as 4 black Chevrolet Suburbans abruptly jumped the curb, boxing in the precinct's front entrance and side exits. The doors flew open in unison, and a dozen agents wearing heavy tactical vests emblazoned with FBI and DOJ poured out, moving with terrifying practiced efficiency. The front doors were pushed open and secured. Leading the vanguard was Supervisory Special Agent Elena Rossi, a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense veteran of the Bureau who served as Marcus's operational tactical lead. She carried a heavy breaching tool, though it clearly was not going to be needed tonight. "Securing the perimeter, Director," Elena announced, her team instantly fanning out to cover the exits, the stairwells, and the administrative offices. "We're locking down the network servers now." "Excellent timing, Agent Rossi," Marcus nodded. "Chief Vance was just about to show us the way to the records room." Voss's breathing grew shallow. He looked around his precinct, his fiefdom, now swarming with federal agents systematically dismantling his authority. The reality of the situation crashed down on him, stripping away his bluster. He realized with sudden terrifying clarity that he was going to go to prison. "Listen to me, Whitaker," Vance stammered, his voice suddenly desperate, taking a step closer to Marcus and dropping his volume. "You don't need to tear the whole place apart. If Harlan went rogue on the highway tonight, that's on him. He's a hothead. I've been trying to build a case to terminate him for months. I'll give you everything you need on him. We can contain this to a single bad apple." In holding cell number 2, located just down the short hallway off the bullpen, the acoustics of the old building carried Voss's desperate bargaining perfectly. Vance Harlan stood gripping the steel bars, his knuckles white, listening to the man who had ordered him to keep the streets clean by any means necessary instantly offer him up as a sacrificial lamb. A cold, hollow pit opened in Vance's stomach. The karma of his actions was not just physical imprisonment. It was the absolute crushing betrayal by the very system he had abused to protect himself. He had operated under the assumption of absolute loyalty, the thin blue line that Vance preached constantly. But in the face of federal prison, that line did not just break, it evaporated. "Did you hear that, Harlan?" Marcus's voice rang out clear and loud, ensuring it carried down the hall. Marcus looked directly toward the holding cells, ignoring the chief for a moment. "That is the sound of your commanding officer attempting to trade your life for a lighter sentence." "Shut up," Vance hissed, panicking, reaching out as if to physically grab Marcus's arm before Agent Rossi stepped forward, her hand dropping to her sidearm, freezing the chief in his tracks. "Do not touch me, Harlan," Marcus warned, his eyes locking onto Vance with absolute disdain. "And do not insult my intelligence. We have the encrypted text messages from your burner phone. We know you specifically instructed your patrolman to target out-of-state minorities, to seize cash under civil asset forfeiture, to fund your department's slush fund. Harlan is not a bad apple. He is exactly the weapon you designed him to be." Vance stumbled backward, hitting the edge of Sergeant Foley's desk. The mention of the burner phone, a device he thought was completely untraceable, was the final nail in his coffin. His legs gave out, and he slumped into a plastic waiting room chair, burying his face in his hands. "Agent Rossi," Marcus instructed, turning back to the operational commander, Take Chief Voss's badge and weapon. Read him his rights. Place him in holding cell number 3 right next to Officer Harlan. I want them to have plenty of time to discuss their respective defense strategies. With pleasure, Director, Elena replied, stepping forward with handcuffs already drawn. As Voss was hauled to his feet, stripped of his authority, and marched down the hallway, the precinct fell into a chaotic, organized rhythm of a federal raid. Agents were boxing up files, imaging hard drives, and securing the evidence lockers where thousands of dollars had conveniently gone missing over the years. Marcus stood in the center of the storm, perfectly calm. He watched Voss get locked into the cell adjacent to Vance. The two men did not look at each other. They sat on their respective steel cots, separated by a cinder block wall, united only by the profound, life-altering devastation they had brought upon themselves. Sawyer Quinn walked timidly up to Marcus, holding a clipboard he did not know what to do with. The young rookie looked terrified but also strangely relieved. "Director Whitaker, sir?" Sawyer asked softly. "What happens to me now?" Marcus looked at the young man. He saw the fear, but he also saw the moment on the highway when Sawyer had hesitated, when his conscience had momentarily battled his training officer's corrupt instructions. "You are going to sit in the break room, Officer Quinn," Marcus said, his tone professional but entirely devoid of the malice he had directed at Harlan and Voss. "You are going to write a highly detailed chronological statement of everything you witnessed tonight and everything you have witnessed since you joined this department. If you are honest, you will be the star witness for the federal prosecution, and perhaps when the dust settles, you can be part of rebuilding a police department this town actually deserves." Sawyer nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Marcus turned and walked out the front doors of the precinct, stepping out into the cool pre-dawn air. The sky was just beginning to turn a bruised purple on the eastern horizon. The operation was far from over. Months of legal battles, indictments, and trials lay ahead, but the rot in Oak Haven had finally been exposed to the light. He pulled his coat tight against the morning chill, ready for the long day ahead. By morning, the Oak Haven Police Department had been entirely hollowed out and repurposed into a heavily guarded federal command center. The morning sunlight filtering through the grimy lobby windows illuminated a scene of absolute methodical devastation. The local dispatchers had been sent home, replaced by DOJ communication specialists. Every filing cabinet in the records room was empty, their contents boxed, barcoded, and loaded into unmarked transport vans. In temporary interrogation room A, formerly the detective's break room, Vance Harlan sat shackled to a heavy metal table. He had been stripped of his uniform shirt, left only in a plain white undershirt and his dark uniform trousers. The physical loss of the badge and the tactical vest made him look remarkably small. His eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night spent staring at the cinder block wall of a holding cell, listening to the agonizing sounds of his own precinct being dismantled around him. The heavy door clicked open, and Supervisory Special Agent Elena Rossi walked in, carrying a thick manila folder and a digital audio recorder. Marcus Whitaker followed closely behind her, his demeanor as impeccably composed as it had been on the side of Highway 41. He took a position standing in the corner of the room, arms crossed, silently watching the broken patrolman. "Good morning, Mr. Harlan," Elena said, intentionally stripping him of his rank. She set the recorder on the table and pressed the red button, reciting the date, time, and the individuals present for the official record. "I want my union representative," Vance croaked, his voice raw. "Thomas Wright. I'm not saying another word until Tom is sitting in that chair." Elena did not look up from her folder. "Mr. Wright arrived at the precinct approximately minutes ago, Mr. Harlan. We permitted him to review the dashcam footage from your cruiser, the body cam footage from your vest, and the preliminary arrest warrant detailing the federal civil rights and obstruction charges." Vance sat up slightly, a flicker of desperate hope igniting in his chest. The Union was powerful. The Union always protected its own. "And where is he?" "He left," Marcus stated from the corner, his voice slicing through the stuffy air of the small room. "Mr. Wright informed us that the Union's legal defense fund does not cover premeditated federal felonies or direct assaults on federal agents. He officially withdrew the Union's representation of you, effective immediately. You are entirely on your own." The flicker of hope died instantly, replaced by a suffocating, icy dread. The final pillar of Vance's protective fortress had just crumbled into dust. "He can't do that," Vance whispered, staring blankly at the metal table. "I pay my dues." "Your dues do not buy immunity from the United States government," Elena replied sharply. She opened the folder, revealing a stack of financial documents, bank statements, and wire transfer receipts. "Now we can sit here in silence, or we can discuss Blue Line Holdings because Chief Voss has been sitting in Interrogation Room B, and he has been incredibly talkative." Vance's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and furious betrayal. "Blue Line Holdings, he told you about that lying coward?" "He told us everything," Marcus interjected smoothly, stepping forward to lean his hands on the metal table, bringing his face mere inches from Vance's. "He detailed how you deliberately targeted out-of-state drivers, specifically minorities, to execute illegal civil asset forfeitures. He explained how the cash seized from those vehicles was never logged into the evidence room but instead funneled directly into a shell corporation registered in Delaware, a corporation that you and Harlan Voss used to purchase 3 commercial properties in the neighboring county." Vance's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. The highway stop had just been the catalyst. The DOJ was not just here for a civil rights violation. They were here to dismantle a multi-million-dollar extortion and money laundering syndicate masquerading as a local police force. Voss swore it was bulletproof, Vance mumbled, the confession slipping out involuntarily as the sheer weight of the evidence crushed his remaining resolve. He said the local judges would never look into the seizures. They just signed the paperwork. "Local judges, perhaps," Elena said, pulling a pen from her pocket. "But the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and the FBI do not simply sign paperwork without looking. Chief Voss has formally offered to testify against you in federal court in exchange for a sentencing recommendation. He claims you were the primary enforcer. He claims you acted alone in the physical intimidation and profiling." "That's a lie!" Vance shouted, the chains on his wrists rattling loudly against the table. "He ordered it every shift briefing. He gave us quotas. He told us who to look for, what cars to target. I was just following his directives." Marcus stood up straight, exchanging a brief, satisfied glance with Agent Rossi. The prisoner's dilemma had worked flawlessly. The moment honor among thieves evaporated, the entire criminal enterprise cannibalized itself. "Then I suggest you start talking, Mr. Harlan," Marcus said coldly. "Because right now the train is leaving the station and your former chief is sitting in the only available seat." For the next hours, Vance Harlan poured out every dirty secret the Oak Haven Police Department had hidden. He detailed the illegal searches, the fabricated probable cause, the evidence tampering, and the systematic financial ruination of innocent motorists. He gave them names, dates, amounts, and locations. With every word he spoke, he hammered another nail into his own coffin, completely unaware that his desperate attempt to drag his chief down with him was exactly what the federal agents had orchestrated. Karma was not merely arriving. It was being meticulously documented by a court stenographer. Later, the United States District Court for the Eastern District was a monolithic structure of white marble and polished oak, a stark contrast to the grimy small-town corruption of the Oak Haven precinct. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, civil rights advocates, and dozens of the victims who had been terrorized on Highway 41 filled the heavy wooden pews. Sitting in the front row of the gallery was Marcus Whitaker, dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, his expression an unreadable mask of professional detachment. Next to him sat Sawyer Quinn, no longer wearing a police uniform but a modest suit. Sawyer had testified beautifully during the grand jury proceedings, his detailed logs providing the unassailable backbone of the prosecution's timeline. He had resigned from the force shortly after the raid and was now attending a local community college seeking a degree in social work. At the defense table sat Vance Harlan. The time in federal pretrial detention had aged him a decade. His shaved head was pale. His aggressive posture had dissolved into a perpetual defeated hunch, and the bright orange of his prison jumpsuit seemed to swallow him whole. 2 tables over sat Harlan Voss, equally diminished, refusing to even look in his former officer's direction. Assistant United States Attorney David Sterling stood at the podium, delivering his final sentencing recommendation to the presiding judge, the Honorable Robert Harrison. "Your Honor," Sterling's voice echoed through the cavernous room. The defendants did not merely break the law. They fundamentally weaponized it. They transformed a badge, a sacred symbol of public trust, into an instrument of extortion, racism, and terror. Vance Harlan operated as a predator on the public highway, secure in the false belief that his uniform rendered him untouchable. Today, the United States respectfully requests that this court shatter that illusion permanently. Judge Harrison, a stern man with decades on the federal bench, adjusted his reading glasses and looked down at the two men standing before him. The courtroom held its collective breath. "Harlan Voss," Judge Harrison began, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "In light of your plea agreement and your cooperation in uncovering the financial extent of this syndicate, this court sentences you to years in a federal penitentiary to be followed by years of supervised release. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay complete restitution to the victims of your asset forfeiture scheme, and your municipal pension is hereby dissolved." Voss squeezed his eyes shut as the U.S. Marshals stepped forward to secure him. "Vance Harlan," the judge continued, shifting his unforgiving gaze to the former patrolman. Vance's hands trembled visibly where they rested on the defense table. "Your actions on the night of your arrest and the subsequent investigation into your history reveal a man completely devoid of the moral character required to hold authority. You shattered the collarbones of innocent citizens, you stole from those you were sworn to protect, and when confronted by a superior authority, you attempted to destroy evidence." Vance swallowed hard, staring at the floor. The gravity of his reality was absolute. "It is the sentence of this court," Judge Harrison declared, the words ringing out like a death knell, "that you serve years in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Because of your status as a former law enforcement officer, you will serve this time in protective segregation. You will have hours a day in a cell no larger than a parking space to reflect upon the lives you have ruined." The heavy wooden gavel slammed down. Crack! The sound made Vance jump. It was over. The marshals grabbed his arms, turning him away from the bench. As he was led toward the side door of the courtroom, his eyes involuntarily scanned the gallery and locked onto Marcus Whitaker. Marcus did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply offered a slow, deliberate nod of his head, a silent acknowledgement that the scales of justice, violently tipped for so long by corrupt hands, had finally forcefully slammed back into balance. Vance broke the gaze, his spirit entirely broken, and disappeared through the heavy oak door into the shadows of the federal penal system. Power, when unchecked and cloaked in the authority of a uniform, inevitably rots into arrogance. Vance Harlan and Harlan Voss believed their isolated town was an impenetrable fortress where the law served their greed and prejudice rather than the public. But their fatal mistake was assuming that the victims of their corruption were powerless. Justice is often criticized as slow, but when the full, unyielding weight of the federal system is brought to bear, it strikes with absolute, devastating precision. The story of Oak Haven serves as a grim warning. The universe has a profound mechanism for delivering karma, often seating it directly in the crosshairs of those who believe themselves to be the hunters. Ultimately, the badge they used as a weapon against the innocent became the very iron that forged their prison bars. One of the most powerful lessons from this story is that real power is not found in a badge, a title, or the ability to make others afraid. It is found in character, self-control, and truth. In life, some people believe they can abuse others, humiliate them, or take advantage of the weak without ever facing consequences. For a while, it may even seem like they are winning. But sooner or later, arrogance destroys itself. What truly matters is not how loudly you dominate a room, but how strongly you stand when life tests your integrity. Marcus showed that dignity, patience, and wisdom are stronger than cruelty. Even under pressure, he remained calm, disciplined, and unshaken, proving that courage does not always shout. Sometimes it stands silently, firmly, and refuses to be broken. This is a lesson for all of us in real life. Never let injustice make you lose yourself. Never mistake silence for weakness. And never think that wrong actions will stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, truth has a way of rising, and when it does, it can change everything. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of how important justice, respect, and inner strength are, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever seen a moment when karma arrived at exactly the right time? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss more emotional and meaningful stories like this.